Dr. Eric Russell, welcome back to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
Thanks. Great to be here.
Yeah, it's great to be back with you, my friend. It's always fun to chat, and we always have good conversations even before we hit record and get rolling. Just catching up with you after the holidays, and now we're into the new semester at the university, and just getting a chance to catch up has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it has. It's good to see you.
Today, we're going to continue our servant leadership conversation series. And I thought today would be fun to talk about unselfish mindset and the connection with servant leadership. It's not about us. It never was, and it never will be. And so we're going to explore this together and what that can look like, and the different aspects of what we might call selfishness or unselfishness, and how it might connect to leadership and servant leadership. Before we get started, I just wanted to share Dr. Russell's bio with everyone in case, well, maybe I won't share the whole bio, but I do need to do at least a little bit of an introduction. Dr. Russell has joined me now on maybe a dozen or more of these servant leadership conversations. We might even be up to like 15 or so. And I would invite listeners to go back onto the Human Capital Innovations website to the podcast tab, and you can see all the episodes either in order as they've come out or by topic. And one of the areas is all of our servant leadership conversations. And so you can go back to the back catalog and check all of those out. Dr. Russell has joined me on a number of these, and he is an HCI research associate and an associate professor of emergency services at Utah Valley University, with extensive experience in emergency services, fire services, and doing consulting work around the globe. So it's a real pleasure, Eric, to have you back. And we've known each other for a really long time, and are good friends. So it's always fun to have these conversations with you.
Yeah, looking forward to this.
So, Eric, I know that you've done a lot of thinking and writing along the lines of the selfish, unselfish kind of dichotomy, and the different forms that it might take in our work life, and how that might connect with servant leadership. Would you mind giving us just a quick overview of your initial thinking along the lines of the role of unselfish mindset in servant leadership, and then we can go from there?
Sure, absolutely. One of the faults of servant leadership literature is it left this huge gap of what's in it for me. And in 2014, I just had this epiphany, and it was based on Rand's book, The Virtue of Selfishness. And if I had the ability to go back, I would have told her that was the worst thing she could have made the title, because the book should have been The Virtue of Rational Selfishness, because there is a universal difference between irrational selfishness and rational selfishness. But that thought kept going with me through my work in servant leadership. And then finally I sat down and I came up with this theoretical concept that was published in Servant Leadership Theory and Practice, known as the Servant Leadership Cycle of Benefit. And what it is the cycle of benefit exists in servant leadership, and it's a constant cycle. It never goes away, because there is always this tangible and intangible benefit to the servant leader through their service to the follower. And it could be something as simple as what Adam Smith said, which is you find happiness in the success of others. Selling servant leadership is very difficult in the corporate world because of the high speed, low drag, winner takes all mentality that has to exist in order to be a successful for-profit company, and the same in very alpha professions of military and fire and police and things like that. But when you show them that when you serve the needs of others, that in fact serves you, servant leadership starts to make sense. Instead of what the literature has done ever since, and Greenleaf never intended people to interpret servant leadership that way, and he put it out to the universe hoping that people would have been able to take it and say, hey, listen, these are the benefits that exist of being a servant leader. And nobody did. And so from the cycle of benefit, that kind of took off. I got some feedback on that after it was published. But then we ran research with C-suite level executives. I think we had 10 of them in that study from all different for-profit, very successful industries. And what we found is there was, when we asked them about what happens when you meet the needs of your followers, what happens when you have trust of your followers, and we never pushed servant leadership. We never even brought it up. We just used a lot of the characteristics of constructs. And what came back was huge. One of the biggest ones was freedom from management. Like that was massive, that these people who were very successful realized that when you meet the needs of others, your people grow, that frees you as an individual from that day-to-day grind of having to manage them, because they're now free. They can now self-actualize. They can now grow and be creative and innovative. And that was one of the major findings that came out of that study. There was a few of them, but that was one of them. But that's really what it's about, is too much servant leadership is wrapped up in religiosity, and it doesn't do the philosophy any favors, because the truth is being a servant leader is a rational, selfish decision to be selfless to others so you yourself can benefit. And that benefit comes to you even unconsciously. There are people that don't even think about that, but their happiness, money, legitimate power, the gifting of the ability to persuade, all comes from the fact that you serve others and others then gift those things to you.
Yeah, thank you for that overview and going into a little bit of the research that you've done. I know you've done a lot of work in this area, both on the academic side and in terms of speaking and consulting and writing, even for more practitioner-oriented audiences. And it's an interesting thing, because as I was preparing for today, trying to decide on which topic to focus on, and trying to consider this particular topic, like the different angles we could take with it. And I had the same thought. Like on the one hand, I love the idea of pure altruism. I love the idea of it. I don't know what it is about my upbringing, about the values, that were ingrained in me at a young age, but I love this idea of just a completely selfless individual willing to lay themselves on the line for the people around them with no thought to themselves. And part of that comes back to, religious and spiritual teachings and upbringing. But that still resonates with me. And I love the idea of altruism. But like, how do you actually put that, like operationalize altruism in the real world, and especially within an organization, when you're leading in a corporation, like you said, with these high stakes? You need to have outcomes and measure your KPIs, and you need to make sure that you're meeting all your benchmarks. And how do you convince people in that kind of an environment to be altruistic, like in kind of the truest sense of how most people probably think of the word? And it becomes really problematic for a number of reasons. And one of the biggest issues I've seen in my own personal life is I see myself as one, I like want to embrace that. I want to be altruistic. I want to put the needs of others before myself. But you know what? When you do that consistently, you tend to burn out. Like you don't practice self-care. I've felt this way many times in the past. Like I just felt selfish for like taking care of myself, like selfish for getting enough sleep, selfish for getting exercise, because that's time that I'm spending instead of helping my kids or instead of helping my wife or whatever. And so that's a personal flaw of mine. Like it's an ongoing wrestle that I have even today, as I try to figure out and balance and practice self-care and, prioritize my own physical and mental health. And so that rub, and talking about unselfishness, which sometimes I equate with kind of this altruistic motive and doing things versus this rational selfishness, which doesn't mean you're just this ego-driven hedonist, but
No.
it means, that the reality is there will be mutual reciprocal benefit, right? That it's just natural. It's the way it works, that you will get something back from the way you lead and serve other people. So that's something I try to wrap my mind around, that I try to balance and deal with that tension. Any thoughts about that as you hear me babble on?
Oh, you're not babbling. You're actually hitting on something that a lot of people who come into servant leadership, and they're like, well, how do I be more altruistic? And I'm like, you can't. The truth is there is almost, and I don't know how else to say it, altruism outside of the existence between you and somebody else. So there's altruism between you and your wife. There just is. In order to have a healthy relationship between two people, be it co-workers, followers, and the altruism only exists in the moment of, I am giving 100% of myself to you and you're giving 100% of yourself to me in this moment, right? But altruism being used outside of those is a huge mistake. It's actually benevolence. Is people just want to feel like they're doing good. And so we throw the word altruism out there. But let me tell you something. There isn't a single person, not one single person in the United States or around the globe that we put on pedestals that are famous and rich and successful that were altruistic. Nobody. Mother Teresa wasn't altruistic. She derived joy. And so the entire philosophy of altruism and the definition of itself, it just doesn't exist, because essentially there's always some type of a benefit. There is always some, and if there is always some type of a benefit, and let's talk about the religious aspect of it, right? Because a lot of people of religion come to servant leadership philosophy, and then they try to put a lot of times they try to put a Christian spin on it. Is they want to see it as this sacrifice thing. There is no greater sacrifice than a man who lays down his life for another. But if you're religious, you believe on the other side that there is glory in that sacrifice. So even in your faith, you believe that there is glory on the other side. And so even if you believe that, even that sacrifice itself isn't altruistic, because whatever exists on the other side, and nobody knows, if you believe that to your core, you believe that you're going to live in glory. And so therefore the whole entire concept of altruism starts to unravel. But then people start to have problems with this. We see this in a lot of parents who feel that they have to sacrifice for their children, and they can't take 20 minutes to go swing a kettlebell or do some mindfulness. You're no good to your kids if you're unhealthy. You're no good to your kids if you're depressed and you're anxious and you feel like everything's crumbling around you, but for some reason you're just going to be the male praying mantis and sacrifice for the species. That's cultural. That's actually culture that has been injected into the minds of people. And that's where you're at as far as your religion, how you get pulled. It's like, I feel guilty that I go exercise and I go work out. And I say to myself, I come from a career field that if you didn't work out, I'm pissed at you. Like, if you were Joe Bag of Donuts and you're coming to my organization to work with me, it's like, no, because the fact that you are not being good to yourself and taking care of yourself means that you can't take care of other people, and I can't rely on you because you got 35 pounds of chewed bubblegum for a butt. I need you to actually be in your top physical condition to do that. And so I would argue that personal responsibility is the greatest form of humility, because you're saying that I'm going to take care of all of this stuff so nobody else has to, and then I can enter the fold ready and capable. Does that make sense? And so if I see, when I've done consulting with people that are at high levels, and I remember I worked with one that was in charge of a very huge nonprofit, and this individual was 60 pounds overweight, skin looked terrible, wasn't sleeping, and then it was telling me all of these problems with the organization, was telling me all of these problems with the people. I think I've talked about this before. Well, we got them healthy. You know, I ended up going from being, hey, instead of trying to infuse servant leadership into your organization right now, we need to infuse servant leadership into you. We need to get you to grow. We need to get you to heal. We need to get you on the right track. And the funny thing was, they reached out to me 6 months later and dropped a bunch of weight, was working out, was sleeping. Their home life was great. They were getting close to their spouse again, great relationship with their kids. And guess what? A lot of the problems that they had at this organization ended up going away. Why? Because now they're in tune, they're focused, they're razor sharp, they're there for their people. And their people are seeing that this individual is out there grinding and getting at it. And their people got at it too. Leadership isn't a joke. People actually look to their leaders for inspiration and stuff like that. We make fun of it a lot of times, but the truth is people who are in charge of organizations matter, because organizations thrive a lot from the head down. And if you're unhealthy and not taking care of you, if you're not taking time off, your people aren't taking time off. And if your people aren't taking time off, they're drowning. And so all of that is a cycle. All of it goes back to that cycle of benefit.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. There's a lot of research on this. For example, specifically with taking vacation time, paid time off, it's extremely clear. It doesn't really matter how many days the organization gives to their people or what the policy says. What matters the most is what people in positions of leadership actually do. So, you know, if I want to help my people have work-life balance, that means I need to practice work-life balance. If I want them to take vacation time, that means I need to take my vacation time. And everything you're saying absolutely resonates with me. And again, it comes back to this just kind of internal wrestle of all this ingrained, you know, a lifetime of ingrained values, you know, of like saying this altruism and unselfishness is important. And, you know, it is important that we don't walk around each and every day thinking solely about ourselves. It's important that we do think about the needs of others. And I guess what you're pointing out is it's just a false dichotomy to say you're either selfish or you're a completely unselfish, altruistic person, right, willing to sacrifice everything.
Yes.
And surprise, surprise, that it's not that simple. That you can actually, you know, I think about it actually. Years ago, I was probably in my late 20s and I was in my doctoral program. I was stressed. I was putting on a little bit of weight, and diabetes runs in my family. And so I remember at the time, you know, I didn't personally really care at the time. You know, I was stress eating, and so I didn't really care about it. I just figured it's how I was coping. And, you know, I probably would have just kept going down that path, but my wife expressed some concern. And what got me to shift some habits and to change the way I was eating and to get a little exercise, was my care for my family, for my wife. Like, I wanted to make sure that I was there and healthy for her, and that I didn't like slip into, you know, becoming diabetic because of some horrible habits. And, you know, selfishly, that wasn't something I was ever going to even do because I just didn't care. But because I cared about my family and because I cared about being there for them, then that helped me do some of the things that I needed to do to make sure that I was taking care of myself. And so that's just one example, right? Like it's all interconnected. And ultimately, when I think about organizations with really great leaders, those leaders do show selflessness. They do show an orientation and focus on the development of their people. They don't, they're not all about themselves. They're not walking around, with their ego on their sleeve, just trying to get attention from everyone. That's not what good leaders are about. But good leaders also recognize the need to, they need to put their best foot forward. Otherwise, they don't have credibility with the people at their level, right? They need to make sure that they're continuing to achieve. They need to make sure that, they have to deal with kind of their own personal brand and their own expertise to make sure that people, at their level or higher in the organization will listen to them. And so there's this constant balance of trying to focus on the development of your people, but necessarily you also have to focus on your own development. Otherwise, you can't develop your people. And I do think that in a lot of organizations with a lot of people, that imbalance, I would argue there's not a very good balance. And it's, especially in US culture, for example, we tend to be so individualistic. We tend to be so focused on our own personal growth and career development, that I think if I were to say as a gross generalization, I would say, that more often than not, we need to err on the side of, focusing on others and unselfishness in corporations. But not, again, this is it's the use of the terminology that can be tricky, because we're not talking about pure altruism, and rational selfishness is still going to be part of the mix, because you have to make sure you can't take care of your people. You can't protect them. You can't develop them. You can't create opportunities for them unless you are managing the internal politics, and unless you are making sure that you are, mediating all those other issues that require focus on yourself and the issues that you're dealing with each and every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if you look at the way the military trains officers, so let's look at take Air Force for instance. You have a career field in the Air Force. It's known as Superman School, and they're pararescue, right? Well, the people that are in charge of pararescue, which is Air Force Special Forces, are known as they're CROs, they're combat rescue officers. So the pararescueman is probably, bar none, I mean, they're Navy SEAL paramedics. Okay, they embed with deltas and they are as unbelievable as you can get physically, mentally. These are apex predators. Okay, but the people in charge of them are even worse than that. And the reason is they have to be worse. So if you meet somebody who is, let's say, a Green Beret, they're unbelievable. You meet somebody that was an officer in the Green Berets, they're at a whole nother level, because the officers are held to even higher standards, because how dare they not be able to display greatness in what they expect from their people. And it's that awesome leadership 101 freshman year question that you ask people in leadership classes is you and the two people that you care the most about are in a canoe, and you're out in the middle of a lake and the canoe flips. Who do you save first? And if the answer isn't myself, then you don't understand leadership. And the reason is, if as a rescueman myself, if I can't save myself, I can't save you. If I don't put my mask on first, I can't save you. That's why you see a lot of these firefighter shows and stuff like that, where they're in a burning building and they take their oxygen mask off and they put it on the victim's face and then carry the victim out of the building. That's crap. That can't happen. You want to know why? You can't make it that far. You've got to carry a whole nother human being. So you have to get that person to clean air, and then you can start CPR, and then you can start bringing them back. But we try to push that narrative even through our media, through our heroes, this altruistic stuff. But remember, Batman was a billionaire, okay? And so it's cute when they talk about stuff like that, passion, sacrifice for others, and all this stuff. But these are individuals that have already been given the opportunity to self-transcend, which is Maslow's sixth, that a lot of people don't like to talk about. We always end up at that self-actualization, but there really is self-transcendence. And the people that tell you to do that stuff are usually people that have already been afforded the opportunity of having a G6. Okay. And in order to be good and be good for others, you have to be good yourself. And if you believe for some reason that you are somehow sacrificing for others, ask yourself, would you come to work if I took away your paycheck? You can still have your job, but I'm not going to pay you anymore. You're not coming back to work. So let's stop pretending that your work is about your passions. Your work is about paying your mortgage. Okay. And then over on this side, if I said to you, you can take this leadership role, but you're just going to basically die out. Well, you're not going to take that leadership role either. So I can't recruit you. So I have to pay you, or you're not coming to work. Why? Because of your needs that you have as a human being. And then over here, I'll give you the position and I'll give you the title, but you're basically just going to die out. You know, you're going to die out through your altruistic self-sacrifice to others. Okay. You're not going to take that position. And so I know it's very lowbrow, but you have to break it down at that level, or people don't start to see all of the crap that's been fed to them to make them think that way. Because the truth is if you're in a college class and you're studying some humanities subject matter and your social justice left and right and altruism and all this kind of stuff, why don't you go work at a soup kitchen? Why don't you quit school and go help a mom and pop family farm that's just keeping their head above water? And the truth is because you don't really want to. And it's because as a human being, you know damn well that you were brought into this world naked and alone, and you are going to die naked and alone. And all you have is control over who you are and building yourself up. And if you want to do, Steve Jobs has done more for the poor than people that have actually started food banks. All right. Steve, you want to help people, be successful. You want to be charitable with people, start a corporation and a company, make it successful and give people jobs and benefits and all this kind of stuff. We have construed volunteerism and free with good, and we have mistaken profit and success with greed, irrational selfishness, and bad. And that I don't know why we've done this. Maybe it's to put more money in the offering plate every week. I don't know what it is, but it's a huge mistake, because the truth is if you want to help somebody, be successful, and you can seriously help people. And then you don't get it as a sacrifice, because you have the tangible benefit of seeing the happiness in others and the success of others, and you have that fulfillment. And therefore, altruism doesn't exist in that either, because you are rationally selfish by wanting to help others because you yourself will benefit.
So as we have just a few more minutes, let's think for a moment about like how can the average day-to-day leader in an organization run with this idea of, you know, having a level of unselfishness in that you're focusing on your people, you're trying to develop your people, but also recognizing the need to practice self-care, the need to put forth sustainable effort, you know, where you don't burn yourself out, you know, putting forth the effort that will allow you to successfully navigate your own career. Because if you're a martyr, it doesn't actually help anyone who reports up to you, right? Yeah. So like, what are some tangible things that a leader listening to this episode today can start doing to strike that balance?
Well, first is you have to change your mindset of what it's about. Okay. So if you decide that you're in charge of an organization, and you decide that you're going to do some professional development for your people, kind of like what Starbucks did, where they're like, hey, you work for us, you can go to Arizona State University for free. We're going to pay your tuition. And by those people getting educations, they're going to grow. And some of them might leave. but some of them might stay with the company, and some of them might do awesome things. So you've got to get out of the mindset of doing things for my people so they can be better is somehow a sacrifice. It's not, because in the end, you always win. You make more money, you get more legitimate power. So that right there, first and foremost, is a complete change of thought. And that's going to take some serious reflection, because we've been programmed, whether we want to believe it or not, we have been programmed to think that altruistic way, that Judeo-Christian programming that happens to so many people. Number two, it's what Adam Smith said, is you have to appeal to the self-interest of the baker. The baker has to understand that that they actually want to make you great bread. So you have to appeal to people's self-interest. Self-interest matters. I mean, John Locke wrote about self-interest. All of your moral philosophers have all written about the self-interest of other people. Why? Because, again, if I take away your paycheck, are you coming to work tomorrow? No, you're going to go find another job. And so leaders have to understand that both their self-interest matters, but the self-interest of your people matter too. So if you're going to put people into that hamster ball rat race that is freaking corporate America, they have to understand that there's a prize at the end of this thing. You can't expect people to, it's that article you and I wrote about the 4 hours. It's really all you get. You can't expect people to make that sacrifice, because the sacrifice is really about family, if there isn't a reward waiting for them at the end. And so understanding the importance of self-interest of both yourself as the leader and of others is important. It is also changing and again, this is reflection as well. You have to change your mindset about how you approach people. That's why servant leadership works. That the philosophy isn't a second place finisher. And last, you have to understand that as the leader in charge of an organization, your people are looking to you, okay? And they see you at the top, and they will mimic. We're hairless chimps. They will mimic your behavior. And if you aren't physically healthy, emotionally healthy, you have good life balance, you're taking time off. If you're not doing that stuff, your people aren't doing that stuff, and therefore you're not going to get the best out of your people. And guess what? That means your organization isn't going to get the best out of your people. There are companies out there. Ton's book, The Good Job Strategy, she's out of MIT. That is a book that I recommend to a lot of people to go and visit, because you see that the simplicity of meeting the needs of people in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the physiological, the social, the belonging, the safety, all this kind of stuff. That's just not stuff that we teach in management 101 classes. They really, really matter. And the great leaders of the great companies in America understand these things, and they ensure that those bottom parts are taken care of, because if they're not, you can't get the best out of your people. And so the biggest takeaway that I would say for this is understand that when you serve your people grow and become creative, innovative, come up with new ideas, and you yourself in the end are the person who benefits the most.
Yeah, amen. Well said. Ultimately, I suspect like as you mentioned, this altruism mentality is ingrained in us. So I suspect there are a lot of people listening who have the same kind of internal struggle as I do, as I expressed.
A lot.
And so, you don't, that's okay. Like, I think that's not abnormal. The point is to just work towards over time shifting your mindset in a way that will allow you to successfully navigate the complexities of the world you're in, the organization you're in, that you're going to be able to ultimately find the balance that will allow you to stay healthy and productive while also developing your people. And like you've mentioned several times today, Eric, though it's a reciprocal process, right? The more aligned you are, the greater your ability to help and support and mentor and coach and develop your people so that they can be more aligned and more productive, which then in turn helps you look better in your job, which allows you to get more resources, which will allow you to reinvest in your people. Like, it's just an ongoing cycle. And if we can remember that and focus on that, then we can make sustained effort over time that will allow us to have the greatest possible outcome for not just ourselves and our family, but for the people that we lead and serve, and for our organizations that we're trying to help to be successful. Well, thank you, Eric. It's always a pleasure chatting with you. I appreciate all of your insights. And as we close, I just want to say again, as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that everyone can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day, and be able to find a little bit of balance between the selfish and the unselfish, or the rational selfishness, right, that we need to have to be successful. And I hope everyone can have a great week. Thank you.